Come, gather around. Yes, that's good. Hush now, hush. Sit, boys and girls. Sit and let me tell you a story of a little girl named Oscar. She was born Claudia Ellen Venable on July 26, 1939, in Seattle, Washington. The middle child of 3 sisters, Carol the eldest and Crystal the youngest, to William and Esther. Her father wanted boys, you see, so he gave each one of his daughters a boy nickname. Claudia, Oscar. Loved her storybooks, paper dolls, and dressing up in all sorts of costumes. But what she fancied most was the time she spent at her neighbor's house, Magie. Magie was a wonderful storyteller and would spin tales of magical creatures and far-off places. This influenced Claudia throughout her whole life. When Claudia was 14, she was stricken with polio, but thankfully survived. And while the tragedy of losing her parents came at a young age, the eldest, Carol, and her new husband stepped in to raise her sisters, and Claudia grew up to be a beautiful young woman. She graduated from Lincoln High School. She modeled wedding gowns and formals for Hillis Formal Wear, where she was granted a full scholarship to the University of Washington, majoring in journalism. On April 24, 1959, she married George McCormick. They had 2 daughters, Melinda in 1962 and Katrina in 1970. Though Claudia was a dedicated stay-at-home minister's wife, being a mercurial woman, she later found secretarial and administrative work in law firms and student financial aid offices. However, always a free spirit and fun-loving, she became a wonderful storyteller herself. She would make up characters for herself with all sorts of voices to tell stories to children at the local library, and would make Bible stories come to life in the church's Bible classes. For that, somewhere in the 1970s, she discovered her true identity as a writer and began to thrive. After her daughters grew and were in school, she would form the Seattle chapter of the National Writers Association, which used a critique model that would become a standard for many more groups around the country. Developed and introduced in 1986 by Claudia, although her genre was Celtic stories of historical fiction, she became a very sought-after editor and ghost author in all kinds of literary arts. She's been published across several collections of short stories, as well as her very own novel, Raven at Sunrise. Claudia has been blessed by many things in her life, but what she truly cherished most was the gift of grandchildren. She has 5 in all, and even though she was 80, battling demons within herself, she tried to balance her family and career as best she could. After her divorce in 1994, she eventually moved to Cartersville in 2002 and showed her love of literature by creating the Georgia and Main Street Book Writers Association. Claudia has worked to make sure that Cartersville's writers, young and mature, published and unpublished, have the ability to write a dream or inclination into a living, breathing story worthy to grace the desks of agents and publishers alike. You see the standard in the critique group is still meeting to this day. Claudia became a swim instructor to remain agile in her later years. It was there in 2008 at the local senior center that she met Alva Bob White. In keeping with her strong Celtic traditions, the couple was handfasted on Valentine's Day in 2009, and 1 year and 1 day later they tied the knot. By this time, she was gifted with great-grandchildren. Bob not having children of his own, was enamored by the idea of being welcomed into such a large and growing family. Claudia was an eccentric, creative being who loved her people. She was a magical storyteller to audiences young and old. She suffered from liver cancer and passed on February 12, 2025. Her written works, family, and her many friends also survive her. Over her life, she was and got to nurture the hearts and minds of her current and prior husbands, 2 daughters and their husbands, 5 grandchildren, their spouses, and 9 great-grandchildren. Not to mention her parents, 2 sisters, 3 nieces, and 3 nephews. She was dearly loved and will be dearly missed. Do not be sad. Claudia would not want you all to be. She would want you to rejoice and relish in the love you have and will give to others in the future. Oscar, as Claudia fondly remembered herself, is now dancing in the fields of those far-off wondrous places she would dream about.